Come see us live on tour. We'll be in Los Angeles, Dallas, Texas, Austin, Baltimore, Hartford, Syracuse, Atlantic City, Cohoes, New York, and Providence, Rhode Island. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for tickets.
Any resident who was trying to take her walker and go walk in the hallway and wasn't listening and was becoming agitated, they would take the walker away. Like, goes against everything we've ever learned. You never let someone who has an aid to walk alone in their room without their aid. Like, it's just crazy. It puts them at risk for falls, and once they fall and break their hips, we know it's all downhill from there. So, at that point, my mental health started deteriorating, to be honest. I started smoking weed again. I was crying all the time. And I was working with people with mental health issues in the community. Like, it was a disaster. It made no sense to me. The lockdowns were so much more harmful than the actual virus. And so, and then I understood, like, I started understanding, I healed myself because I became aligned with myself, my values, my belief, my truth. And here I was disaligned again. And my silence made me feel like I was on the side of the oppressor. And I wasn't okay with that. And so once I figured that out, I decided to speak out. And so it's a long story, but I spoke out. I lost both my jobs. I'm under 5 investigations by the college, one which turned into a disciplinary hearing. Actually, they just now sent me, while we wait for the decision, 3 new cases that are going to turn into disciplinary hearings. We were defamed internationally by the media, called domestic terrorists by some, because I ended up in Washington, D.C. not too long after that. We had countless death threats, summons, RCMP at our door, you name it. And so, so that's kind of what happened when I spoke out.
You have special guests with us. Sarah Shujujian is a registered practical nurse from Toronto, who has been involved in advocating for patient well-being, particularly in long-term care settings. Guess what she did? She founded Nurses Against Lockdowns, which then merged into Canadian Frontline Nurses. So they're not good citizens. She is also the founder of Lighting Up Dark Corners, an organization that empowers survivors of child sexual abuse and domestic violence to heal and to rise above their trauma. Shujunian has faced disciplinary hearings, no kidding, and termination from her nursing position due to her outspoken criticism of COVID-19 related policies. Wow. Well, I don't know what you're probably doing your own research. Please welcome to the show, Sarah Shujunian.
Thank you so much for having me.
So
I'm very humbled to be here.
Tell me about your story. And as a nurse, you decided to, what did you start noticing, and what made you decide to organize Nurses Against Lockdowns?
Yes. So first of all, I'm not a nurse anymore. So I'm just going to put that out there, because my college might be like, she's still saying she's a nurse, and get me on another disciplinary hearing for that. So, I don't know if you want me to start. My story can start in the nursing home, but really I started seeing things back in 2017 when I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia. So I don't know if you want me to go a little bit back.
Oh, really? What happened?
Yeah. So for those of you I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia in 2017. It took the medical industry like over a year to figure out what was going on with me. And for those of you who don't know, fibromyalgia is basically you feel the big general symptoms is that you feel exhaustion and severe nerve pain, widespread pain for over 6 months. But all the other symptoms in the book can also be tied to fibromyalgia. And so what happens is that there's no testing for it. The medical industry doesn't really know what it is. And so it's by elimination. So they thought I had rheumatoid arthritis. They thought I had endometriosis. They thought I had irritable bowel syndrome. But it was just test after test after test until, and I was falling apart. Honestly, I'm a single mother of 3, and I was in a lot of debt. And I was having a hard time getting up to go to work. It took me like 10 minutes to literally move my joints. And I was also starting to have bladder problems. I had sciatic nerve. I was having trouble with my gait, memory loss, swallowing. I felt bugs on my skin, you name it. And the doctors were like, well, maybe it's all in your head. And I was like, oh my God. So I decided to do my own research, like you said.
No. No.
Yes. Yes. And I found out about fibromyalgia and how it's all about toxicity. And toxicity meaning, anything that causes inflammation or stress in the body. So that's many things. Could be in the food, the water, the air, medications, but most importantly, um, trapped emotions and unresolved trauma cause a lot of stress in the body. And that made a lot of sense to me because I had a lot of that in my past. And so around the same time, the medical industry did actually diagnose me with fibromyalgia. I was referred to a neurologist who, in 30 seconds, pressed a few pressure points and said, oh, you have fibromyalgia. And so what happens then is that what they do is they give you Band-Aid medications because they don't know what it is. And so first things that they want to give you is painkillers, sleeping pills, like all that strong, like stuff. And what happens is that I wanted to take it, but I didn't. But what happens is that people take it and then they feel better for a while and then they become tolerant and they need a higher dose and a higher dose until they can no longer have a higher dose and it's a long-term disability. So I was like, what? And that I was really thinking like, what's wrong with these doctors? Like, do they even know what they're doing? So I started really looking at the medical industry differently at that point. And I decided to get help. And so I went to the Gatehouse here in Toronto. It's a safe space for adult survivors of sexual abuse. And there I found out I was super normal for what I had gone through. And so a lot of my shame, I was able to drop a lot of my shame, start accepting myself, forgiving myself for all the things I put myself through. And, I was able to start caring and loving myself. And so within a few months, I got sober. I started going to the gym. I was eating healthy food, taking supplements. I lost 60 pounds. I was in the best shape of my life at 40. But most importantly, I started standing in my truth. So I stopped betraying myself to please everybody else. And I put the blame back from my childhood stuff where it belonged. And I stood in my truth. And I just, within a year, no longer had any symptoms of fibromyalgia. And I was in the best shape of my life. And I started running programs at the Gatehouse because I loved it. So I became a facilitator there and started noticing that a lot of people with trauma had somatic illnesses and the medical industry wasn't able to figure out what was wrong. And I was telling them what I knew and they were getting better. So I decided to found Lighting Up Dark Corners. Now this is in 2019. But, I had my 2 jobs, nursing jobs, and being a single mother of 3 and a lot of debt. I was kind of like Lighting Up Dark Corners kind of took the back burner. And then the pandemic hit. And so that's when because I was already like, oh my God, what are my residents eating? Why am I giving them so many medications? I started feeling like I was actually the problem. Instead of being the nurse who cares and helps people, I felt like I was a tool in this monster of a system that was making profit over people getting sick. And as I said, that's when the pandemic hit. And when you work in a nursing home, the government doesn't care about these people. They literally get a fraction of the daily food allowance from the government than prisoners do. So I was like, nobody's going to believe this. This is crazy. So I went into work and, started to try to talk to people and nobody wanted to hear it. Everybody was really scared to talk about it. And, I was chief steward of the union where I worked. So I was known to be the big mouth and they were like, Sarah, not for this.
They were scared to hear what?
Well, I was just like, this is crazy. We can't be complying to this. Like everything went against our rights.
You mean the COVID narrative in general?
The COVID narrative, but the nursing homes shut down right away. So there was protocols that were put into place. Family members can come in. I was like, this is crazy. Like family members are not going to come in. We were just told to put masks. We were forced the administration was taking our temperature twice a day. So many crazy things. They were telling us to regown. So we're now supposedly in a pandemic. You have to be even more careful than usual. And, we put isolation gowns when people are in isolation. And now we had to kind of do that at first for everybody. And then, it was just
And
A mess.
and so you were the only one that was.
In my
There was no other nurses that they were like skeptical of this.
They were, but they didn't want to be seen speaking about it. It was just insane, the fear that surrounded and how it was like you couldn't even say anything. And I was like, this is crazy. I'm going to say a lot of stuff. So I called the union and I told the union, like, they're taking away all my residents' rights. They're taking away our rights. Like, what are we going to do about it? And the union turned around and said, Sarah, don't you care about your residents? And that's when I knew I was going to be in trouble and there was going to be no help. And I started getting scared that I was going to get fired because on top of being in debt and being a single mom, anyone who worked in a nursing home couldn't go to their other job. So I had 2 jobs. I could no longer go to my job in the community. So I was losing money. So I stayed quiet and I started seeing my residents deteriorate. I had a resident that died of a heart attack within 1 week of the families not being able to come in. And people were like, oh, it's probably coincidence. Well, no, it absolutely wasn't. This is the type of resident that when I came in the morning, I had to call her daughter right away to know what time her daughter was going to come because her mom was going to ask me every 5 minutes when her daughter was coming. And if her daughter was a few minutes late, she would go into anxiety and almost escalate into an attack. An anxiety attack, and she had heart problems. So what happens to these people who have language barriers, dementia? They don't care about lockdowns and viruses. They just want to see their families. And so she stressed herself out and had a heart attack. And I don't think that people realize this, but obviously nursing home is the last stop for these people. And the only thing they look forward to is when their loved ones come in. You can see them come to life. And some of our residents don't eat from us, because they're smart. They know that if they don't eat from us, their families are going to come in. And so what happened to those people? Well, they let themselves die. They starved to death, and it's called failure to thrive. And they even had the audacity to hire new volunteers to come feed these people. And I kept fighting. I kept saying, this is crazy. The family should be coming and they're not going to eat from them. They know them even less than they know us. So it was a mess.
So they would let volunteers come in to feed them. They wouldn't let their family come in and feed them.
Yes, they hired volunteers.
So that's one of those things that no matter how many times someone tries to explain it, it's unexplainable. And there's no logic to it whatsoever. Just like you have to take a vaccine so my vaccine works. That never made sense and never will make sense.
Exactly.
But this is what, and people were, if you press people's fear button, they go along with stuff like this and they don't question it. And I think because I was a comedian and because you had your experience finding your own truth and standing up for your own voice, you were able to stand up against this. And my whole life as a comedian was standing up against the status quo and making fun of it and poking holes and showing where it doesn't make sense. And so that's why I was able to do this with COVID. Plus, I got vaccine injured. It really, it made me. But I know people who got vaccine injured still didn't say anything.
Very true. I
got emails from people in news media saying I got myocarditis, but I'm not saying anything. Keep doing what you're doing, and because they know it would cost them their job. It's just so good.
People nurses are still scared till today to talk.
Of course,
so I'll continue. So then they started testing us too by force. We have to give them our health card in the workplace. Like, so wrong. That's not legal. They're not allowed to do that. But the union wasn't standing behind me. And so they started testing our residents too. In my nursing home where I worked, 3 housekeepers tested positive, no symptoms whatsoever. And so now not only can nobody come in, the residents are locked into their rooms for 14 days until everybody is after 14 days, they test everybody again. And if everybody is negative, then people can come out. And you can imagine some residents were really not down for that. And they didn't even understand. They didn't want to stay in their room. And so those residents were said to have a behavior, and the doctor was called and they were sedated. And any resident who was trying to take her walker and go walk in the hallway and wasn't listening and was becoming agitated, they would take the walker away. Like, goes against everything we've ever learned. You never let someone who has an aid to walk alone in their room without their aid. Like, it's just crazy. It puts them at risk for falls, and once they fall and break their hips, we know it's all downhill from there. So, at that point, my mental health started deteriorating, to be honest. I started smoking weed again. I was crying all the time. And I was working with people with mental health issues in the community. Like, it was a disaster. It made no sense to me. The lockdowns were so much more harmful than the actual virus. And so, and then I understood, like, I started understanding, I healed myself because I became aligned with myself, my values, my belief, my truth. And here I was disaligned again. And my silence made me feel like I was on the side of the oppressor. And I wasn't okay with that. And so once I figured that out, I decided to speak out. And so it's a long story, but I spoke out. I lost both my jobs. I'm under 5 investigations by the college, one which turned into a disciplinary hearing. Actually, they just now sent me, while we wait for the decision, 3 new cases that are going to turn into disciplinary hearings. We were defamed internationally by the media, called domestic terrorists by some, because I ended up in Washington, D.C. not too long after that. We had countless death threats, summons, RCMP at our door, you name it. And so, so that's kind of what happened when I spoke out. I don't know where you want me to go now.
And so then how did that lead into you starting Nurses Against Lockdowns?
Okay, so I first spoke out in October 2020. I was actually the first active nurse to speak out at a rally here in Canada, and I had founded Nurses Against Lockdowns. And I thought the mission was to unite nurses, educate the public, and bring the ethics back into healthcare. And so when I did my first speech, the first time I spoke, I also spoke about Nurses Against Lockdowns, and I thought that all the nurses in the crowd were going to come on stage with me and we were going to stop this right then and there. That didn't happen at all. But one nurse did see me, Kristen Nagel, and we teamed up, and that's how she actually called the nurses in the States, Erin Marie and Nicole Siratek, you might know them. And we came together, and we were going to meet in Florida, but Dale Bigtree invited us to speak in Washington, D.C. on January 6th. And me and Kristen were so excited. We had no idea about how political that day was. So we ended up there. And we were global frontline nurses at that point, and we wanted every country to have a chapter. So when me and Kristen came back, we were the first chapter. So Canadian Frontline Nurses. That's how Canadian Frontline Nurses came about. And then Nurses Against Lockdowns, which was only me, I merged it into Canadian Frontline Nurses. And so Canadian Frontline Nurses were proud advocates for medical freedom. And we went across the country. We did road tours. We spoke everywhere that we could at all times. And we weren't, I just want to make it clear, because some people think we're anti-vaxxers. And that's not what it's about. It's about informed consent. This is what we learned in school. It is our job, actually, when the medical industry turns against the people. This is the first thing we learn in ethics. When the medical industry turns against the people, it's our jobs to, I quote, agitate and advocate for what is best for our communities. And we can clearly see that around this vaccine, there was no informed consent. Informed consent has 5 categories. It means the benefits, the real benefits too. It's no lying, obviously. So the benefits, the risks, the alternatives have to be known, right, before someone can give informed consent. And they have to know how it works in the body, and they have the right to have all their questions answered without corruption. And so that wasn't happening. And so that's what we were doing. We were letting people know that not all nurses agreed with this, and that, we were giving people a warning, like this vaccine was not safe and effective.
Well, it is safe and effective. So that's where you're wrong, because that's what the FDA,
the college told me.
That's what the FD. I don't know what your kind of crazy research you're doing that led you to say something like that, but I have to correct you because the YouTube science and the FDA and the CDC clearly says that it is safe and effective, and that and even though they had to change the definition of what a vaccine is, it's definitely a vaccine. And even though it doesn't stop transmission or contraction, it's still definitely a vaccine because it stops what does it do? It will prevent you from getting I think seriously ill or dead. And so that's the and it slows the spread. Even though everyone got it anyway, you got it slower, which is that's attractive. And so that's a big part of it. When I got the polio vaccine, I was like, I hope I get the I hope I get polio slower.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. You know how that goes.
Yes,
I just have to clear that up. So are people though? I always because I've traveled to Canada for 30 years doing comedy, and I always found Canadians to be sensible and to care about their civil rights and things like that, and be skeptical of big corporations. And what do you think happened to Canada during COVID? Was it just the corrupt leadership of Justin Trudeau, or what was it?
No, I think that Canadians were very gentle, thank you, sorry, we don't sue people. We're not like you Americans. No, but I think that's what it is. Oh, don't rock the boat. We're more well, I say we, I'm not a part of that team, obviously. But I think that we're just known to be peaceful and not causing too much problems kind of people. Is what people told me, and then I was like, well, it looks like that's what it is. So I'm not sure. People are really scared, scared to lose their job. People are very quiet when they're scared to lose something.
I mean, I was surprised to see people who I knew personally who wouldn't eat GMO food, who were rabid advocates for an experimental medical treatment with no long-term studies, coming from big pharma, to fight a vaccine, to fight a virus that was created in a lab, that was lied about by as a bioweapon from DARPA, through a CIA cutout called EcoHealth Alliance. Even though Barack Obama put a stop to gain of function. I mean, all that stuff. I'm not supposed to know that because that's me doing my own research. And the reason why they had to shame people is to make them stop doing their own research, because if you looked into it, you would find out it was one big criminal organization running everything. And also the WHO is, under the thumb of billionaires. They're not actually advocating for the health of people. They're advocating for the policies being pushed by their donors. And their biggest donor is Gavi and Bill Gates, right? So you put those together. Anyway, I don't know if I'm allowed to say that about the WHO. They're fantastic. But Trump just pulled us out of the WHO. So I think...
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, so that's a good thing, because they were trying to push legislation to make the WHO supersede our own government, our own local governments. And if there was declared another pandemic, they would be able to mandate anything they wanted, and we'd have to follow it. And if we didn't, we'd be breaking the law because we had signed on to that law. But so thank God for Trump doing that, at least.
Yes.
I'm sure that he'll be doing plenty of things that I don't like, but that's certainly one thing that's great that he did.
Yes, absolutely. I agree.
So,
and
ahead.
Fun fact is that there is the World Council for Health. I don't know if you've heard of them.
No.
And I just joined them. Actually, they have a new nursing department kind of thing where, and so it's an organization that's obviously in its grassroots, but it's global, and it's something that is trying to be what the WHO was supposed to be, with people like us.
Yeah,
that spoke out. And so just so you know,
it's supposed to be an altruistic organization comprised of health professionals who are interested in people's health, not run by a legit terrorist who hangs out with terrorists and isn't even a doctor. That guy he's a veterinarian, the guy who runs the WHO, correct?
Tedros, yeah.
Yeah. and is completely infiltrated by billionaires. That's what the WHO is, right? So, yeah, I think I'm allowed to say that because that's a fact. But you're a lot of facts YouTube doesn't like.
Right.
They didn't like it when I was saying the vaccine didn't stop transmission or contraction, and I was saying that before anybody else was saying that, and so I got in trouble for that. And I said, but it doesn't. It doesn't stop transmission or contraction. And they said, yeah, you're not adding enough context. They said you got to say that it slows contraction, and I'm like, well, who gives a f? Like again, it's like, oh, I want to get polio slower. But so now I say it does. I say it slows contraction, and it'll keep you from serious illness or death. And don't pay attention to those studies that say that the more boosters you get, the more it wrecks your immune system and makes you more susceptible to getting sick and sicker. That's not true. Even though there's people saying that, and they're saying that there's studies that say that, don't listen to that. Just listen to what Big Pharma says and listen to what the CDC and the FDA says, because they're all good people right before they go work for Big Pharma, right? That's why. That's right.
Yeah.
And
hey.
So where do we end up? What would you like to say before? What are you up to now?
Yeah, so I need public awareness with my my cases. So it's two big cases actually. So are you okay with me speaking about them right now?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. So remember I said that I had 5 investigations against me?
Yeah.
The first one turned into a disciplinary hearing. And so and this case is very important because remember, I was the first one to speak out. So I'm the example for the other nurses here in Ontario and or Canada. Even.
So they used their persecution of you as a warning, just like when they locked up Julian Assange. That was a warning to other journalists. You better not reveal secrets of the war machine or else we're going to put you in jail. So they were doing this to you publicly as a warning to the other nurses. You better keep your mouth shut, keep your head down, and go along, right?
Absolutely. And it's been a long journey. It actually started in March 2023 and just finished in December 2024. And it was supposed to be, it's a case, it's a very important case. It's not about vaccines or anything. It's about freedom of speech in nursing. Right. And it's very important because
freedom of speech, that sounds very right wing.
I guess so. I've been told I'm very, very right wing. I didn't know, but
yeah,
so yeah, and so there's 11 allegations, 12 allegations against me, which are all known to be true today. And so And they're all from when I first spoke out. So that's with Nurses Against Lockdown. So it's kind of like October 2020 till February 2021. And all these allegations are known to be true today, but they keep saying that I had no way of knowing back then, right? So it was all about that. And it was supposed to be a 7-day hearing with my experts against the college's experts. And it ended up being 30 days. My experts, who are very known here, I don't know if you know them, but Dr. Byron Bridle, virologist and immunologist that was actually working on the vaccines, not qualified for 10 out of the 12 things he was supposed to cover. And Dr. Pellick, which is another great researcher and immunologist, I believe, was also only allowed to speak on 1.5 of the 4 issues he was supposed to talk about. So basically, the evidence is not in. I was on the stand 6 days. It's all about discrediting, right?
Right.
And even though while I was on the stand, I went through the code of conduct because they sent me these allegations and they put the code of conduct at the end. And I thought that's weird because like the code of conduct and the standard of practice is exactly what I did. So I'm like, what? So I showed them while I was on the stand how I followed every single aspect of their code of conduct and standard of practice and how they didn't. And no, they just turned it around. There's so much gaslighting.
So can I ask you, so I know in the United States, Dr. Fauci held the keys, the wallet, right? So he was the one who would give funding to universities and to research people, and he could make or break your career with that kind of funding. And is it so? So that's why people would be corrupt, and that's why the people who originally said the virus came from a lab in Wuhan flipped, because Fauci gave those people millions of dollars in research fund, meaning he gave them bribes, and then they flipped and said, "Oh no, I think it came from a wet market," right? So we know that's true because we have the emails that reveal that, right? And so that's why people are so corrupt. And of course, the news media in the United States takes all the money. 70% of cable news is funded by big pharma. So we all know this, right? So so they're all corrupted by the money. Now, why in Canada is it the same thing up there? Does big pharma somehow hold the purse strings to the colleges and the research, and what is it the same kind of corruption happening?
Well, I'm sure some of that is happening, but also here it's like a lot the government, because we don't have a CDC. I mean, I guess we have other things, but it's not the same. So the government funds public health, and public health puts in all the mandates and measures and policies and all these things. And I mean, Klaus Schwab did say that he owns half of the cabinet here in Canada. And I'm pretty sure he owns Justin Trudeau. So, I mean, there's funding coming from up above, obviously. Probably not in the same way.
And so how can people help with your case? So obviously they're doing a political prosecution of you, and they're not allowing you to present a defense properly. They're discrediting the expert witnesses you have and not allowing them to. So is this in front of like a jury of your peers?
Yes, it's in front of a panel of members of the disciplinary committee.
Oh, so it's not
licensed persons.
So it's not just random nurses that were picked out of. It's these people who are already in a disciplinary. Okay, so these are So you're in bad trouble. So how can people help you?
Yes, but we never really expected to win at this level, and we do plan on appealing it and bringing it up, and especially maybe having more chances because other doctors have gone through this already, and the divisional court just denied the appeal. So hopefully that doesn't happen, because we intend to take it as high as we can, because this is serious. Freedom of speech in nursing. If nurses can't be the last line of defense, like we saw what happened.
Yeah. So do you have a Give, Send, Go or something that people can help contribute to?
I do. Actually, I have a new webpage, because this is not the only big case I'm in. There's also our big case coming up for the Emergencies Act. So Canadian Frontline Nurses, we were boots on the ground, part of the convoy here in Canada.
So the truckers protest, and then Justin Trudeau invoked the Emergency Powers Act, which gave him the right to freeze their bank accounts and things like that. And It was proven by the highest court in the land in Canada said that was an improper use of the Emergency Powers Act. Of course, there's no punishment for him doing that. So what is your involvement with the Emergency Powers Act?
Well, he's appealing it, and he's coming back in court February 4th and 5th. But we were the first group to sue them, and we're the only protesters group that represents the people. So the other two groups are two law groups or associations and things like that. So they're just looking at the legalities. They're not saying that there was no need for an emergency act, for the Emergencies Act to be put in. That's what we're saying, right? And so the problem is that the judge didn't want to hear that, and he said we're too controversial, and dismissed and silenced us. And that's actually illegal. That's unlawful in itself. Like he has to hear what we have to say. We have all the stories that back up why this was not supposed to happen. It was a love fest. I've never seen so much unity in this country. It was amazing. It was people coming together, uniting to give a message, and the government shut down the message, didn't want to even hear the message. I think he said he had COVID. And then, put in the Emergencies Act. So it's kind of important. The judge dismissed us. So the judge doesn't want to hear it. So we are appealing that, because we want the people to be heard. The stories from the ground need to be heard in order to see how incredibly tyrannical that was. And so that's where we come in.
And so tell people how they can help you.
Yes, so kind of cool. I now have a web page, so they can just go there, and there's a little bit about everything, like my case with the college, my case with the Emergencies Act. So it's sarahforfreedom.com. So Sarah with an H, number 4, and freedom.com. And all the information is there, and you can help me through that. I'm actually in a lot of debt, and the college is actually going to come after me, and I'm supposed to pay their cost of their 5 lawyers in those 30 days of hearing. So, but I don't. Anyways, maybe I shouldn't say all that, because I don't intend to pay that. I'm not going to lie. I don't have money. I had to sell my house.
So
I had to sell my house. I had to, so I don't know. They're not going to get money out of me. But I need help to keep these things going. And so that's what it's all about.
Well, you should set up a corporation, and so then they can sue you, but not this corporation, and so stuff. You should talk to.
We had Canadian Frontline Nurses was the corporation,
okay.
But we went after the Canadian Nurses Association and a news outlet for defamation. And the courts, we used a SLAP, which is an acronym, which I should know by now, but it's really something grassroots organizations use against big corporations harming the public. And they turned that against us and used it on us, and we lost. The judge, it was just crazy. There's so much corruption. And so Canadian Frontline Nurses is now inactive and collapsed. So that was the organization.
So it's just people have no idea how corrupt their governments are. They have no idea that you're not run by politicians. You're run by huge, big money interests. And just like every movie has ever depicted from the last 150 years, since they started making movies, everything that they put, of course it's true. Of course we all live in Pottersville.
Yes.
So that is, and that people can't. What? No, I voted. My vote counts, and no, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. If it counted, you'd have freedom of speech. We would have never gone through COVID the way we went through it. But your vote doesn't count. Yeah. So, all right, but people should go to sarahforfreedom.com. Sarah with an H, the number 4, freedom.com, and they can help you. Sarah, I really appreciate you coming on, and thank you for pushing back against corruption and the COVID narrative and telling the truth. Yeah, I know firsthand. There's not a lot in it for us to do that, right? There's the exact opposite. You get people turning on you, you get slandered, discredited, you get hit pieces written about you, your reputation gets dragged through the mud. Facebook did that to me, and that's why almost all my old friends in Hollywood now think I'm some kind of criminal, because I was telling the truth about COVID on Facebook, and then they would attach a bullshit fact check to it that's saying this is disinformation, and they're like, "Oh, Jimmy Dore is trying to capitalize." What a horrible human being, trying to capitalize, make money when we're all trying to protect old people from dying from COVID. So that's what people thought, and now Zuckerberg gets to say, "Hey, turns out all those fact checks were wrong, and we're going to stop doing that." Isn't that something?
Yes, it is.
But there's nowhere to go to get our reputation back. So.
But you know what? We get to still have our integrity, and we get to keep our soul. Our soul is intact. I don't know, but I can sleep at night. I wouldn't be able to sleep if I was them.
I can't sleep, but it's got nothing to do with COVID. But but anyway,
thank you so much,
Sarah.
Thank you so much.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for doing what you do. I hope to meet. I'll be up in Toronto. We're in Toronto, right, eh? Or we're going to be coming up there. I think in what is it? Is it May? I think it's at the end of May. We're going to be up in Toronto.
Oh,
so hopefully we could run into you.
Yes, that would be awesome. I would love that.
Okay. All right.
Okay, take care. Thank you.
Okay, it was a pleasure. Come see us live on tour. We'll be in Los Angeles, Dallas, Texas, Austin, Baltimore, Hartford, Syracuse, Atlantic City, Cohoes, New York, and Providence, Rhode Island. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for tickets.